On the cold, moonlit night of December 23rd, the small town of Millfield was wrapped in an eerie silence. The kind of silence that only descends when something is about to change, when the ordinary world is about to be shaken by the extraordinary. At the heart of this town stood Emily Carter, a woman with a secret buried so deep she couldn't even acknowledge it to herself. But tonight, that secret was about to resurface. Emily was a librarian, someone who found solace in the pages of books, in the comfort of stories that had already been written. But it wasn't a book she was holding this time. It was a letter that had arrived only hours ago, marked with a symbol she hadn't seen in over a decade. It had been years since she'd heard anything about the mysterious group she had once been a part of, a group dedicated to uncovering the truth behind an ancient legend that had haunted Millfield for generations. The legend spoke of a hidden treasure, one that could change everything, and Emily had sworn to forget it, to move on with her life. But now, with the letter in her hands, that was no longer possible. The words on the letter were simple, but the weight of them was enough to make Emily's heart race. The time has come. What time? And who had sent it? She couldn't help but wonder if it was a sign, if fate was pushing her back into a world she thought she'd escaped. As she stood in her small apartment, staring at the letter, her mind flashed back to the events of the past. She remembered the late-night meetings, the cryptic symbols, and the promise she'd made to herself to never speak of it again. The group she had once been a part of had disbanded, their search for the treasure abandoned after a terrifying incident that left many of them too afraid to continue. Emily had left, thinking she was protecting herself, but now, with this letter, she wasn't so sure. Something was pulling her back. As Emily walked through the streets of Millfield, the weight of the letter growing heavier with each step, she felt eyes watching her. It was as if the entire town knew something she didn't. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest sound, a whisper, or maybe it was just the wind, but it seemed to call her name. Suddenly, she saw a shadow move at the edge of the street. A figure in a long coat, their face obscured by the darkness. Emily froze. Could it be? Had someone been waiting for her? The footsteps grew louder, closer, and just as the figure reached her, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The sky seemed to crack open, lightning flashing in the distance. And then, everything went black. What had happened to Emily? Who was the figure she had encountered? And what did the letter mean? The truth was closer than she realized, but the danger was even greater. Would she uncover the secrets of Millfield, or would she become part of its twisted history? The answer was just out of reach, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. When Emily's vision returned, she was no longer standing in the streets of Millfield. She was in a dark, unfamiliar room, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and dust. Her head throbbed, and she could barely make out the details of the space around her. The only light came from a flickering candle on a nearby table, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. She tried to move, but her arms were bound to a chair. Panic rose in her chest as she realized she wasn't alone. A figure emerged from the darkness, the same figure she had seen in the street. This time, their face was visible, a tall man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. His expression was unreadable, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, as if he knew everything there was to know about her, her past, her fears, her secrets. "You're awake," the man said, his voice low and calm, like a soothing lullaby that masked something dangerous beneath the surface. "Good. We have much to discuss." Emily struggled against the ropes that bound her wrists, but the more she fought, the tighter they seemed to become. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She couldn't let her fear control her. Not now. Not when she had no idea what was happening. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "What do you want from me?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My name is Gabriel, and as for what I want, Let's just say I need your help to finish what you started all those years ago." Emily's mind raced. Gabriel? She didn't recognize him, but something about his voice, his presence, felt eerily familiar. The memories began to resurface, ones she had long buried. The meetings with the secret group. The late-night discussions about an ancient treasure hidden beneath Millfield. The symbols. The promise to find it, no matter the cost. But she had walked away. She had left them all behind, convinced that the treasure was more trouble than it was worth. Now, she realized with growing horror, it was all coming back. And she was right in the middle of it. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel tilted his head, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "I know everything about you, Emily. Your past, your choices. And I know what you're hiding. You can't run from it forever." The words sent a chill down her spine. What was he talking about? What had she hidden? Her thoughts were interrupted as Gabriel stepped closer, reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out the same symbol that had been on the letter. The symbol she had seen so many years ago, the one that had haunted her dreams. "I see you recognize this," he said, placing the symbol in front of her face. "It's a map, Emily. A map to the treasure. And you, whether you like it or not, are the key to finding it." Emily's mind reeled. How could she be the key? She didn't know anything about a map, or the treasure, or the legend. It was all so blurry, like a half-remembered dream that she had forced herself to forget. But now, it was all coming back, piece by piece. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. "I don't want anything to do with this. You can't force me into it." Gabriel's smile widened, but there was no kindness in it. "Oh, Emily, you're already involved. You always have been." The tension in the room thickened as Emily's mind began to make connections. This wasn't just about a treasure. This was about something much larger. And somehow, she had been part of it all along. The only question was, what would she do now that she knew the truth? And how much danger was she really in? But before she could respond, the door to the room creaked open. A shadow stood in the doorway, and the last thing Emily heard before everything went black again was a voice. Not Gabriel's, but one that made her blood run cold. "We need to move now. They're coming." When Emily woke up again, the room was different. The harsh, flickering candlelight was replaced by the dull glow of early morning sunlight filtering through a dusty window. She was no longer tied to the chair, but her head still felt foggy, her mind clouded with the remnants of the dreamlike confusion that had gripped her moments before. Gabriel was gone, but the sense of danger lingered in the air, thick and unshakable. She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, as if weighed down by more than just the physical exhaustion. Her hands, though free, were still trembling from the ropes that had once bound them. A slight, unfamiliar pain pulsed at the back of her neck, reminding her of the last thing she remembered, Gabriel's voice, and then, the figure in the doorway. "Where am I?" she whispered to herself, trying to make sense of it all. This wasn't just about a treasure anymore. It was bigger than that. A buried secret, a past she couldn't escape. And then there was Gabriel, the man who seemed to know everything about her. The door creaked open again, and Emily tensed, her breath catching in her throat. This time, it wasn't Gabriel who entered. It was a woman, her long dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders, her expression intense yet guarded. Emily tried to read her, but the woman's face was a perfect mask, neutral, unreadable. "Are you all right?" the woman asked, her voice soft but firm. Emily blinked. "Who are you?" The woman hesitated before answering, her eyes briefly flicking toward the door, as if ensuring no one was listening. "I'm Sarah. I was part of the group with Gabriel. You don't remember me? Emily's mind raced. Sarah. She didn't recognize her. Not at first. But the name triggered something. A faint memory of late-night meetings, faces half hidden in shadow, whispers about the treasure and the group's mysterious leader. Sarah had been there, but her role had always been unclear, and now, seeing her in person again, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah knew more than she was letting on. I don't remember much, Emily confessed, sitting up a little straighter. What's going on? What is this group? Why does Gabriel say I'm the key? Sarah's eyes softened, but only for a moment. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. You've been in hiding for years, Emily. You walked away, but that doesn't change the fact that you were chosen. You were meant to find it. The treasure, the map, it all points to you. Emily shook her head, trying to piece it together. I never asked for this. I didn't want any part of it. After what happened, after everything that went wrong, I thought it was over. Sarah's gaze hardened, her tone becoming more urgent. It's not over. It's never been over. And now, they're coming for you, for all of us. The ones who think they can control the truth, the ones who've been hunting for the treasure for decades, they know we're getting closer. And they'll stop at nothing to keep it hidden. Emily's stomach twisted. She had known there was something sinister about all of this, but the gravity of Sarah's words hit her harder than anything Gabriel had said. Who are they? She demanded. Sarah didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the window, her expression hardening as if contemplating something far beyond Emily's understanding. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost too soft to hear. The Brotherhood. They've been after the treasure for centuries. They're the ones who twisted the legend into a weapon. And they've been tracking you, Emily, ever since you disappeared. They know you're the one who can unlock the final piece of the puzzle. Emily's mind was spinning. The Brotherhood? She'd never heard of them, but the way Sarah spoke of them, with such fear and contempt, made her feel like she was being dragged into something far larger and darker than she had ever imagined. A treasure hunt was one thing, but this was something else. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the hallway, followed by hurried footsteps. Sarah's face went pale, and without another word, she grabbed Emily by the arm, pulling her toward the door. They've found us. The moment they stepped into the hallway, the sound of boots hitting the floor echoed through the narrow space. A man's voice rang out, calling in a sharp, commanding tone. We know you're here. Don't make us come in after you. Sarah's grip tightened, and she began to pull Emily faster, urging her toward a small door at the end of the hall. This way. We have to go. But just as they reached the door, the hallway darkened, and Emily felt a sudden coldness creep up her spine. A shadow moved in the doorway, blocking their escape. Gabriel stepped into view, his face eerily calm. It's too late, he said, his voice low and cold. You're not going anywhere. Emily's breath caught in her throat. There was no way out. Not now. And it felt like the walls were closing in, both around her and within her mind. What was she supposed to do now? And who could she trust? The scene was electric with tension as Ava locked eyes with Gabriel, her expression betraying no fear but filled with questions she didn't dare voice. Behind him, Sarah stood frozen, her hand brushing against the small door they had been so close to escaping through. Gabriel's presence filled the narrow hallway, his calm demeanor more unsettling than anger or aggression. You've run long enough, Emily, he said, his voice low and unhurried. It's time to face what you've been avoiding. Emily's fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but she knew better. Gabriel was a man who thrived on control, on precision. Any outburst would only give him more power over the situation. Instead, she forced her breathing to steady, her mind racing to find an angle, an escape, or even just a way to buy time. "What do you want from me?" Emily asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Gabriel's smile widened, but it was the kind of smile that chilled her to the bone. "What I've always wanted, Emily. To finish what we started. You have the knowledge, the map, and now the determination. The Brotherhood won't stop hunting you, and neither will I, until the truth is uncovered." The Brotherhood. The very mention of their name made Emily's stomach twist. She remembered the whispered warnings, the accidents that weren't accidents, and the way they had dissolved her group from within, leaving fear and chaos in their wake. And now, it seemed, they were closer than ever. "You're insane," Sarah hissed, stepping forward despite Emily's attempt to pull her back. "You think dragging her into this again will solve anything? You'll get us all killed." Gabriel's gaze flicked to Sarah, his calm never faltering. "And doing nothing won't save you either. The clock is ticking, Sarah. Every second we waste brings them closer." Emily's heart pounded as Gabriel's words sank in. She glanced at Sarah, whose bravado was beginning to crumble, then back at Gabriel. There was no denying the danger. They had already felt it creeping closer with every strange occurrence and shadowed figure. But Gabriel's obsession with the treasure and the legend could lead them straight into disaster. "Fine," Emily said suddenly, her voice cutting through the thick tension. "I'll help you. But only if you tell me everything. No more games, no more secrets." "What aren't you telling me, Gabriel?" Gabriel tilted his head, studying her as if deciding whether she could handle the truth. "There's a reason you're the key, Emily," he said after a long pause. "It's not just about the treasure. It's about the power it holds. And it's not just the Brotherhood that wants it. It's everyone who fears what it can do." Before Emily could respond, a loud crash echoed from somewhere in the building, followed by hurried footsteps. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. "They're here," she whispered. Gabriel's calm shattered in an instant. "Move," he barked, grabbing Emily's arm and yanking her toward the small door Sarah had been guarding moments ago. They didn't have time to hesitate. The hunt was on, and the stakes had never been higher. As Gabriel shoved Emily and Sarah toward the door, the urgency in his movements was palpable, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The footsteps in the hallway were growing louder, more frantic. The Brotherhood had to be closing in, but it wasn't the footsteps she feared most. It was the sudden, unsettling silence that followed them. Just as Gabriel reached for the door handle, it swung open with a force that nearly knocked him off balance. In the doorway stood a woman, tall and striking, her features sharp but familiar. Emily's breath caught in her throat as recognition washed over her. "Elena," she gasped. Elena had been a part of their group years ago. One of the brightest minds, sharp with codes, cryptography, and languages. Someone who had vanished without a trace after the Brotherhood's last assault on them. Emily had assumed Elena was dead, or at least out of reach. But now, here she stood, her eyes cold as ice. "You shouldn't have come back, Emily," Elena said, her voice low but laced with an edge of warning. "The Brotherhood isn't the only one hunting you." Gabriel's hand froze on the doorknob, his eyes narrowing at the woman in the doorway. "What are you talking about, Elena?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at Emily, then Sarah, her gaze calculating, almost dismissive. "You think this is still just about treasure? Power? You're both too caught up in your own stories to see the bigger picture." Before Emily could speak, Elena continued, her voice steady and sharp. "The map you're searching for isn't just a key to some ancient treasure. It's a key to something far more dangerous. Something the Brotherhood doesn't fully understand. Something they fear. Something we fear." The weight of her words sank into the room like a stone. Emily's mind raced as she tried to process what Elena was implying. What could possibly be worse than the Brotherhood? What was this bigger picture she spoke of? Who else is hunting us? Sarah demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. What could be worse than the Brotherhood? Elena's eyes flashed as she stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. A lot of people, Sarah. A lot of people who have been waiting for this moment for far longer than you can imagine. Gabriel stepped back, clearly unsettled. Enough of this. If you've come to stop me, then you're on the wrong side. I've waited years for this, and I won't let anyone stand in my way. Not even you. Elena didn't flinch. Her focus remained solely on Emily. I came to warn you, Emily. You and Gabriel are both chasing something you don't understand. And by the time you realize it, it might be too late. The room fell silent as Gabriel's anger simmered beneath the surface. Elena's warning felt like a bomb, one that threatened to explode and take everything with it. Emily could see the conflict playing out behind his eyes, the obsessive hunger for the treasure battling with the growing dread of what Elena was suggesting. "Tell us what you know," Emily demanded, her voice hardening with resolve. Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The treasure you think you're looking for? It's not just a chest of gold or artifacts. It's a weapon, a tool with the power to manipulate more than just physical space. It can warp reality itself, change timelines, erase memories, shift entire histories. It's not meant to be found. It was hidden for a reason, Emily." A chill ran down Emily's spine. A weapon? A weapon with that kind of power? The implications were unimaginable, and her first instinct was to run, to escape, to protect herself from whatever nightmare Elena was describing. But there was no escape now. They were already too deep into this. "You don't have a choice, Emily," Elena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The moment you opened that letter, the moment you stepped back into this, you became part of a war that's been waged for centuries. And now, you're the key player. The Brotherhood? They're just the beginning. There are others who will stop at nothing to control what's inside that treasure. And if you want to survive, you'll have to play their game." Emily took a step back, the room spinning around her. This wasn't just about a treasure hunt anymore. It was about survival, about something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Elena's words echoed in her mind. You became part of a war. Her heart pounded in her chest, the tension in the room rising with every passing second. She glanced at Sarah, who seemed just as confused, her brow furrowed in disbelief. But Sarah's expression hardened, and Emily knew the truth. They had no choice but to keep moving forward. But the question remained. Who could they trust now? The Brotherhood, Gabriel, Elena. Everyone had their own agendas, their own reasons for wanting this treasure. And Emily, the one person who could unlock its secrets, was at the center of it all, caught between forces far more powerful than she could comprehend. Another set of footsteps echoed outside the door, and this time they weren't alone. Emily's gut clenched as she turned toward the window, her instincts screaming that their time was running out. The game had changed, and now the stakes were higher than they could have ever imagined. The door to the room burst open, and this time it wasn't just the sound of footsteps that filled the air. It was the unmistakable creak of metal on wood, followed by a sharp, eerie silence. A group of figures stood in the doorway, shadows stretching across the floor, their faces obscured by hoods. Emily's heart raced. These weren't just the Brotherhood's agents. This was something far more sinister. The figures moved with purpose, their presence suffocating the air around her. Gabriel stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. I knew they were getting closer, but not this fast. Elena's lips curled into a knowing smile. It was never going to be easy, Gabriel. They've been watching us all along. The figures didn't speak at first. Instead, one of them stepped forward, pulling back the hood to reveal a face that sent a jolt of recognition through Emily. It was someone she never thought she'd see again. Aidan, her old partner from the group, the one who had disappeared without a trace. The one who, like Elena, had been swallowed by the shadows of the treasure hunt. "You've come a long way, Emily," Aidan said, his voice like cold steel. "But this is where it ends." Emily's mind raced, her thoughts a blur. How had Aidan returned? Why had he been hiding all this time? And why now, after everything, was he standing here, an enemy instead of an ally? "I thought you were dead," Emily said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. Aidan gave her a cold smile. "It's complicated. Let's just say I've been watching, keeping tabs on everything. The treasure you're chasing? It's not what you think. None of you understand what it really is." Gabriel's face darkened. "Stop playing games, Aidan. What do you want?" Aidan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to Emily, his gaze piercing. "What you're holding, Emily, is not just a map. It's a curse. A force that, if unlocked, will erase everything you know. The Brotherhood, Elena, even Gabriel. Everyone's been chasing it because they think they can control it. But it's not meant to be controlled." Elena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Aidan's right. The power inside that treasure will rewrite history, reshape the world. And the moment one of us activates it, we lose our grip on reality. We'll become something else. That's why I left. I couldn't bear the thought of becoming part of this madness." Emily's heart pounded, her mind reeling from the revelations. A curse? A force that could change the very fabric of existence? She felt the weight of the letter she'd received earlier in her pocket, its significance suddenly clear, and terrifying. All of them were standing on the edge of a precipice, and the only thing between them and destruction was a decision that had to be made in the next few seconds. The figures in the doorway shifted, their eyes fixed on Emily, as though they were waiting for her to make the move. The room felt smaller, suffocating, the air charged with an impossible tension. She had the key. She had always had the key. But now, unlocking it didn't just mean finding treasure. It meant risking everything she knew, everything she believed in. And worse, there was no guarantee that anyone, not even Elena or Aidan, would make it out alive. "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked, her voice hoarse. "If you know what the treasure is, if you know what it can do, why push me to open it? Why not just leave it all behind?" Aidan's eyes flashed, a brief flicker of something, regret perhaps, before his face hardened again. "Because, Emily, it's already too late. The world has already started shifting. Things are out of balance, and no one, not even you, can stop it now." Gabriel scoffed. "You think that we, you, Aidan, have the right to decide who gets to control that kind of power? We have the map. We have the knowledge. It's ours to wield." Emily's mind swirled as she looked at Gabriel and Aidan. She knew the only way forward was to confront the truth. They were all pawns in a game they didn't fully understand. But the moment she stepped into the next phase, activated the treasure, it could mean the end of them all. And she was the one who had to make the choice. Suddenly, the room shook, a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The floor beneath them cracked, the walls groaning as if the building itself were alive. "It's starting," Elena whispered, her eyes wide with fear. A crack appeared in the ceiling, a sliver of light spilling through as if something was tearing through the fabric of reality itself. Emily knew, deep down, that they had reached the tipping point. There was no going back. With a quick movement, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the letter. The symbol on it pulsed with a strange, unnatural glow. Without thinking, she pressed it into the crack, holding it steady. There was a blinding flash. When the light subsided, everything had changed. The room was still there, but everything felt wrong. The air was too still, too quiet. Emily looked around, but the faces she saw seemed different, as if they weren't fully real. Gabriel, Aidan, Elena. They were all there, but they seemed distorted, their features flickering in and out of focus, like a malfunctioning video feed. "What did you do?" Gabriel whispered, his voice trembling for the first time. "I didn't do anything," Emily said, her own voice coming out in a strangled gasp. This wasn't supposed to happen. Aidan stepped back, his face paling as the world around them continued to warp. "The treasure wasn't meant to be found," he murmured, his eyes wide with horror. "It was meant to stay hidden. And now we've unleashed something we can't control." Emily turned, her mind racing. The world was shifting, reality itself buckling under the weight of the map's power. And as the light flickered again, she realized with growing terror that the consequences of their actions were far worse than she had ever imagined. Because now, they were not just chasing treasure. They were caught in a nightmare, a warped version of reality where nothing, and no one, was safe anymore. The room began to collapse in on itself, the walls distorting, folding into impossible angles. There was no escape, not now. And as Emily reached out for a way out, a final twist of fate struck. The door slammed shut. The world outside vanished, and everything was plunged into darkness. The treasure was no longer a legend. It was their prison. And Emily, she was the one who had set them all on this path. The darkness enveloped them, suffocating in its unnatural weight. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, the reality of what they had unleashed finally settling in. She tried to move, but her legs felt like lead, as if the very air had turned to stone. There was no sound, no movement, just the oppressive sense that everything around them had come undone. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Her mind flashed back to the warning in the letter, to the cryptic words about the treasure being a weapon, a force that shouldn't be disturbed. But she had done it anyway. She had opened the door to the unknown, and now the consequences were irreversible. Gabriel's voice cut through the silence, shaky and uncertain. "What is this? Where are we?" Emily tried to focus, her eyes scanning the shifting shadows that now seemed to bend and warp around them. Nothing looked familiar. The walls were gone, replaced by a void that stretched infinitely in every direction. There was no floor, no ceiling, just a vast emptiness that pressed in on them from all sides. I don't know," she whispered, her throat tight. "We're still here. But it feels like we're not." Aidan's figure flickered in the dim light, his expression lost. "The map," he muttered. "It was never about treasure. It's about this. A rift. A distortion. And now we're caught in it." Elena moved closer to Emily, her voice tense but calm. "You didn't just activate the treasure. You tore through the fabric of time and reality itself. This isn't just a physical place anymore. It's something beyond that. We've crossed into whatever it was meant to hide." Emily's mind raced. They were trapped, caught in a shifting reality that was slowly falling apart. The treasure had been a doorway to something they couldn't comprehend, a force too powerful to be controlled by any one person. And now they were its prisoners. "We can't stay here," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to get out. There has to be a way." Gabriel stepped forward, his eyes wide with panic. "How? How do we escape something that's not even real?" A long, haunting silence stretched between them. Then Elena spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Maybe we don't escape. Maybe we fix what we've broken." Emily looked at her, confusion and fear clouding her thoughts. "Fix it." "Elena's right," Aidan added, his tone grim. "If this is a rift, a tear in reality, we have to undo what we did. The treasure, it's not just a key. It's a safeguard. It was meant to keep everything in balance. By opening it, we tipped that balance." The pieces started to fall into place, though the task before them seemed impossible. They had to close the rift, somehow, even if they didn't fully understand what they were dealing with. But one thing was clear: there was no turning back. They were the ones who had broken the world, and now it was on them to fix it. I think I understand," Emily said, her voice gaining strength. "The treasure is the key to both destruction and repair. If we can return it to where it belongs, we might be able to stop this." They had no time to waste. With the rift swirling around them, they moved as a group, each step uncertain but driven by a shared purpose. They had no map now, just their instincts and the weight of their choices. When Emily reached into her pocket, she felt the map, its edges still warm from the energy they had unleashed. It pulsed, almost as if alive. Taking a deep breath, she pressed it against the fabric of the void. And just like that, the room began to shift again. Light filled the space, swirling like a storm, and then, in the blink of an eye, everything stopped. The pressure lifted, the darkness receded, and Emily found herself standing in an empty room. The walls were solid again, the air breathable, the ground beneath her feet familiar. They were back. The rift had closed. But as the world around them settled, Emily realized something more. They hadn't just escaped. They had been changed. The treasure, the hunt, the people they had once been, it had all been a catalyst for something bigger than any of them. They had stepped into a world where choices had consequences, where power was never truly in one person's hands. And now they were free to rebuild, to make a new path. But the question lingered in the air, unanswered. Could they undo the damage they'd caused? Would the consequences of their actions ever truly fade? Emily didn't have the answers. But one thing was certain: the world would never be the same again. And neither would they. As the story came to a close, the reality of their journey, of all they had endured, settled in. The treasure had never been about gold or power. It was about understanding the fragility of the world around them. And in the end, the only true treasure was the choice to walk away, to step into a future that could be shaped by what they had learned, not by what they had lost. And with that, the story was over. But the ripples of their choices would continue to echo through time.